Bauer,
Here.
Hooper,
Here.
Alonso,
Here.
Ryder,
Here.
Wisman,
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
Looks like everyone is present.
Well, thank you for that. And I wanted to welcome Councilmember McDonald back to the Planning Commission. We hope that you had a good year without us, but we're looking forward very much to working with you again.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is general public comment, and this is an opportunity to invite the public to make comments on any items that are not on our agenda tonight, but are within the Commission's jurisdiction. And so we normally allow 3 minutes per person, and I'll turn it over to our moderator, Mr. Roberts, to see if we have any interested public who would like to speak tonight.
Thank you, Chair Potter. I see one hand raised in our attendees. Paul G., I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the time and Happy New Year to everyone. I certainly hope we can do most efficient things this year. One of the things that we don't need to do is change our wireless ordinance. The wireless ordinance is perfectly fine the way it is. We went through 6 months of work back from February of 2018 through August of 2018, debated the issues completely, came to a reasonable solution, and arrived at a protective wireless ordinance that has not been challenged by the wireless industry at all. It is perfectly fine the way it is. It is a waste of city resources, time, and energy to go and try to say we have to actually make a change. But if you are looking at a change, well, who are we doing this with? Well, we have a city attorney who's kind of professing that he knows something about telecom law, yet he is still apparently working with telecom law firm, which is an industry which has admitted that it's part of the wireless industry. So they are not objective. And they're there to get you to be indoctrinated into the wireless industry position. This is wholly inappropriate for any kind of consultant to be advising the city of Petaluma. This has been in the record of the Petaluma City Council and Planning Commission for over a year. You can't miss it. What did Mr. Kramer, who was the boss of Trip May, actually say on video to the point where Malibu fired the firm and wouldn't work with them anymore? This is what he said, quote, "Hi, folks, I consider ourselves part of the wireless industry. Listen, don't use the term radiation. It's technically absolutely the most accurate word and it scares the bejesus out of people. Please stop using the R word. The R word is the F word to us because it makes our job in trying to get small cells approved much more difficult because that's the trigger word. Use any other word, emissions, transmissions, any emissions you want, but please don't use the R word," end quote. That got him fired. The question is, the apple doesn't fall from the tree. That guy works. Trip May works for Jonathan Kramer. What are we doing allowing these people to drive our telecom policy? It makes no sense. What we need to do is break from Eric Danley's move here and just cancel it. Just say, fine, we're going to stick with where we are. We're going to defend ourselves because all the lawsuits are going against the wireless industry right now. I know because I work on this issue daily with the top telecom attorneys across the United States. The FCC's butt is getting handed to them in court decision after court decision. This whole small cell agenda is dying before our very eyes. And you're going to then somehow accept it all in because you're not paying attention? Don't do that. Cancel this project. Stop with all of this craziness. And let's just continue to live and defend our town.
Thank you for your comment, Paul. And I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I'll stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Chair Potter.
Thank you, and thank you for those comments. I think we'll be speaking to the future of that ordinance a little later in the meeting. But at this point, I'd like to close the general public comment period and continue with our agenda. Next item are the committee comments, and we're going to start with Councilmember McDonald.
Well, welcome back. Thank you. I'm looking forward to being in this group. It's one of the hardest working committees the city has. So thank you all for all that you do. As you know, the several highlights of the city right now, especially the district elections. I'm really hoping that everybody had a chance to try and go to the district's map making community of interest website and work with that. I mean, it's great. And if you share that with your friends, more and more people have informed opinions about what the districts are going to be. So that's a good thing. Also, the city had just announced a fairgrounds public process. And so that's a very exciting step forward. It's been during COVID, but now there is a push. That meeting is January 18th, Zoom, 5 p.m. And the other big meetings coming up, and we're doing so much to get public input on everything. The North McDowell Complete Streets Project, that's got a meeting set for January 26th, 6 p.m. And hopefully all those problems that we reviewed when we were reviewing the Corona Station and other things here at planning back some years ago, the lack of sidewalks in the area, the lack of bicycling activities, things like that, that'll all be on the table and hopefully come into a good conclusion with input at that meeting. That's all I had for tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. And again, we're looking forward to all of the items that we discussed and to working with you on so many of our planning issues. So next I'll go to Commissioner Hooper for a report from the Pedestrian and Bike Committee.
We talked about several traffic calming efforts, including a bicycle boulevard and also a potential, trying to remember the exact term, it was a potential roundabout essentially that would go near City Hall. And other than that, we talked mostly about the active transit plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Commissioner Wisman for the Tree Advisory Committee.
Yeah, the last Tree Advisory Committee of 2021, we discussed some of the recommendations and commentary that came out of the presentation that was made to this planning commission. I think it was the day before. So there was some discussion about reorganizing documentation and presenting it in an updated form. So that was, I would say, the primary topic of discussion.
Great, thank you. And thank you for your work on that committee. There are no other committee reports or comments, but I did want to ask if there are other commissioners who have anything to add. If not, just a reminder, I know we've been all on Zoom for quite some time, but it's a good reminder to keep our mics muted when we're not speaking, and I'll try to remember that also in the presentations. So item 5 is the director's report. Ms. Hines.
Good evening, Happy New Year, and welcome back, Councilmember McDonald. We look forward to working with you. So I wanted to start just for any members of the public that may have seen on the tentative, we try to identify what's coming up on Planning Commission agendas. There was mention of the telecom ordinance coming on January 25th. That is not going to be coming. We are still working on that project and would like the opportunity to release a public review draft in response to inquiries we have had from members of the public. So we are going to wait to schedule that until we have had an opportunity to release a public review draft and some time for feedback and comments. So that is still to come, but it will not be on the January 25th agenda. Let's see, I also wanted to bring up a couple meetings that are coming up that may be of interest. Tomorrow night is the Cool Cities Challenge kickoff. So it is as I understand it, it's a 1-hour meeting to kind of kick that process off, and the first kind of broad public meeting on that and with the grant funds and what lays ahead. So I don't have the link at the tip of my tongue, but I can get that and bounce that out to all of you if interested. So that is tomorrow. I believe it's 6 to 7 tomorrow evening. We have a Climate Action Commission meeting on Thursday, and one of the things that they are going to be discussing are the greenhouse gas inventory and potential mitigations that will inform the climate action and adaptation plan that Ramey and Associates is working on in parallel to the general plan update. So that's another important meeting that is coming up. Councilmember McDonald mentioned the Fairgrounds Joint Subcommittee meeting on the 18th. And then we also have a General Plan Advisory Committee on the evening of the 20th. And the General Plan Advisory Committee is going to be looking at the final drafts of a vision statement and the guiding principles and pillars that they have been working on and revising and informing from some of the community engagement that has been happening. The vision report that will ultimately come out of the General Plan Advisory Committee for recommendation to the council will then also be brought to this commission for to keep you informed and any feedback this commission may have on that initial step as the vision statement. So something to look forward to as we move forward. I also wanted to, for both the commission and members of the public, due to the coronavirus and the surge in positive cases, the city has closed city facilities to the public for the month of January to keep both members of the public and city staff safe. So we are doing our very best to continue to provide the service and not skip a beat, but we no longer have like our counter hours in planning and building. Our physical counter hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays are canceled for this month. We are doing more and more online to try to keep that going. We have our new online permitting system that makes it easier for members of the public to submit permits, doing Zoom counter appointments as needed, in addition to email and phone calls. So we are doing our very best to maintain the service levels and make sure we're getting good customer service out to everybody that needs our assistance while City Hall is closed. And we will reassess and look at the data as the end of the month comes closer, and hopefully we'll reopen for those limited counter hours and again in February. So I think that's all I have. And I knew Councilmember Alonso would have a question for me.
First, I just want to say that we have a very busy new year. There are a lot of important initiatives going on in the city, and I appreciate the report. So Commissioner Alonso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Heather. A couple questions. So what's on tap for the January 25th meeting then?
So unfortunately, nothing. We were holding that for the telecom, not wanting to put other things on that agenda, knowing that there would be a lot of discussion and a lot of input. So at this point, there is nothing scheduled for the 25th.
Okay, thank you. And then a couple months ago, we were supposed to have, I think, a study session on that Amy's Kitchen property, this Skinnell development. Is there any update there on when that would come?
Yeah, we were looking at the 22nd of February, but we are right now looking at a parking study session on the 22nd of February. So we're kind of juggling between that and March 8th. So it'll either be end of February or beginning of March.
Okay, thanks. And then I think I saw on an earlier version of the timeline that we would take a look at Scott Ranch
Yes.
EIR. So when is that scheduled to come back?
So we're waiting for that final EIR. We're still receiving sections of the final EIR, the admin draft of the final EIR. So it's hard to say until it will be in the next couple months. But I hesitate on a specific because we're waiting on work product from the consultant.
Okay, so it won't be February then? I think
No,
initially it was.
I don't
okay.
think so because that's gonna get released. We definitely, it will be, a meteor topic for people to read that final EIR. But when that final EIR does release ahead of, we'll send a notice out. So if you want to start some light reading while we're then getting the packet together for, a week before that, we will definitely transmit that out to everyone so it's released.
Great, thanks. And then from our November 30th study session on gun store regulation, has there been any update from staff and the city manager and council on that issue?
No, there is not.
So has the issue been brought to their attention, or what, I guess, what's the update?
Well, the update is staff did update the council on the discussion that was had at Planning Commission following that study session. As mentioned, likely in March, the council will get an update on the goals and priorities. At that time, that would be a time that we would bring that as something that has come up with a board and commission. And should the council want to prioritize that over something else that was previously prioritized, that is their they have the discretion to do that at that time.
But that I understand, thank you. And then I guess maybe this is a question for Dylan too, but I mean, the commission has the authority to place items on our own agenda, correct? To consider a draft ordinance or do a study session, what have you. I mean, we can make that decision, isn't that correct?
Well, you can make recommendations on policy initiatives to the city council, which is why you had that discussion, and that's why we did forward that outcome of the study session to the council. The council has adopted a very robust goals and priorities and the associated work plan for city staff associated with that. And our direction has been to work on the priorities that the council has set and asked staff to work on. And so until there's a reprioritization, that's what our staff resources are focused on at the moment.
No, I understand, Heather. That wasn't my question. My question was, we can put things on our own agenda. We can give direction to staff, right? As commissioners, that's in our charter, as in our planning commission handbook that's given to all of us. So again, I raise this because just like I said now many times, I mean, I just don't want to wait months and months and months because we're waiting for the council to clear up all the other important work they're doing, right? So again, we can put things on the agenda, correct?
For discussion, but not to direct staff work.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Alonso, what I'm hearing is that we did have that discussion. It was on the agenda and we forwarded our recommendations to the council. And at this point, our staff is working under and through direction of the council on their priorities. And so there isn't staff time to bring another ordinance to the commission until that priority is set by the council and pushed down to the commission. Is that correct, Ms.
That's correct.
So
Right, yeah, that's not what I'm asking, but yes, I understand the process that traditionally has been used by staff in this body. But again, we have the authority, and I think if the council is not making a decision, we need to, again, we took up a general study session. So it wasn't like we looked at one ordinance or a proposed ordinance for the city. So again, I just flagged that because this is a timely issue. That this certainly is something that we should keep at the front of minds. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that discussion. There are a lot of important topics, and I'm going to go now to Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that's an important topic, and I'll report back as such too. My question is there anything you can say about the VMT effort? Meetings?
Yes, I can say that Fair and Peers, we have a updated contract with Fair and Peers. I believe Monday there was a staff met with Fair and Peers to kick that effort off. We are working very closely with Public Works with the VMT effort as we move from the CEQA guidelines associated with VMT, which is kind of the, that was the Senate bill, and that's where this effort started. And as we move more into policy mitigations for citywide VMT, we are pulling our Public Works team in to partner more closely on this effort because there's so much overlap. So my understanding is staff met with Fair and Peers, I believe yesterday, to kick off that effort under the new contract. And one of the things that is being done as part of that is identifying sidewalk gaps to kind of look at some of those opportunities for sidewalk gap closures as an effort to increase our bike and ped infrastructure, and looking for some of the things that the city could look at as part of that VMT mitigation. So it is re-energized, and we're moving forward.
Good, thanks.
Commissioner Bauer?
Yes, thank you, Chair Potter. I wanted to just ask Heather if you could let us know when you're going to bring that issue of the gun sales ordinance in front of the city council, if you could give us a heads up with that, because I know there's many members of the community that are very interested in that. And I spoke to some of them and they were kind of a little dismayed that that wasn't already a council priority. So I know they'd be interested in knowing that when that is coming before the council too. So if you could give us a heads up, that would be great. And also thank you very much, Council McDonald. If you could forward our concern to the city council, that would be great. Thank you.
You got it. Right now, I have on my draft calendar that the council may consider goals and priorities on March 14th, but I'm not sure if that, since that is not a standard council meeting, I'm not sure if that has been secured or not, but we are looking for a date for that update and reprioritization of the goals and priorities.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And I see Mr. Brady has his hand up.
Thanks, Chair. And just to follow back on Commissioner Alonso's question, I got the Planning Commission rules and policies in front of me. It looks like it's Rule 509, and it says an agenda shall be prepared by the secretary for each meeting. It does not say anything about the commissioners being able to add anything, but I'll keep looking.
Well, just real quick, Madam Chair, if I may. I mean, we follow Robert's Rules of Order here, correct? So in Robert's Rules of Order, there's a procedure on how to get an item on a future agenda, which we've done before. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
I'm wondering if we could ask Ms. Hines, maybe, because we won't be meeting for a month, if we could receive an update, because I think all the commissioners are interested in seeing this advance, and we've heard it from at least 2 council members also interested in that. If we could get an update and then see where we might be going if there is a priority setting meeting in March.
I can do that.
Great, that'd be great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions on the staff report, the director's report? Okay, well, with that, I'd like to move to item 6, which is approval of the minutes. And Ms. Ellis, could you please advise us on, I don't have the electronic agenda. I've got my paper copy. I believe that we have received the minutes from the November 30th, 2021, and then December 14th, 2021 meetings. Is that correct?
Let's see, say it again, the
November 30th and December 14th?
yes, that's correct.
Did everyone receive those in their packet? Yes, and are there any questions or revisions to those minutes? So I'm not hearing any comments or concerns. If the commission's pleasure is to approve those minutes, we can pass that item for the November 30th, 2021 and the December 14th, 2021 minutes of the Petaluma Planning Commission. Okay, I see no objections. So our first discussion item for today is the Parklet program. And this is an item we've been looking forward to hearing from staff on. So I believe Management Analyst Nancy Stans is here today to give us that staff report.
Thank you, Chair Potter. Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. My name is Nancy Stans, and I'm a management analyst for the city. I know that some of you have already heard this presentation, so I appreciate your sticking with it and listening to it again, and I look forward to your comments. So as a management analyst in the city's economic development and open government department, I have been working since May of 2020 as the project coordinator and business liaison for the city's free range program, which is the temporary outdoor seating / parklet program that the city set up in response to COVID. And then for the last 6 months, or actually longer, really since last June, I have been working with other staff, planning staff and public works staff to develop a framework for a permanent program. And I'm excited to tell you about that program and where we are right now with it. First, though, I would like to take a couple of minutes and talk about what a parklet is and what it has meant historically and how the COVID restrictions brought the parklet concept to communities like Petaluma. So Eric, I want you to go to slide 3, please. Some of you might be familiar with the history of parklets. For those of you who aren't, or as a reminder, the concept started in the early 2000s with a program that was sponsored by the city of San Francisco. The goal of that program and other early programs was really to, and I'm quoting from a report about parklets, it was to reprogram automobile parking spaces for alternate uses and reallocate them in strategic ways to provide better public space for pedestrians and cyclists. So, it was set up really to be oriented toward pedestrians and cyclists. In the pre-COVID programs, the parklets were sponsored by community members or businesses who paid for construction, maintenance, insurance. Usually the cities required a permit, and there was usually a permit fee, but typically not a use fee because those spaces were considered public spaces. Next slide, please. And as I said, the design, oh, wait, no, go back. There we go. As I was just saying, that the spaces were considered public. The design elements were incorporated to denote it as a public space. Parklet sponsors were encouraged to build fixed benches, bike racks, rather than using movable furniture and chairs. And businesses could be parklet sponsors, but it was mostly, considered to be kind of a part-time endeavor or a complement for the business. Some cities, in fact, prohibited table service outdoors, and so there were state laws in place that related to serving alcohol outdoors that really kind of put a damper on businesses, particularly restaurants, kind of using that space as a commercial space. It was really meant to be a community space, a place for businesses to interact with the community and community members to interact with each other. Next slide. Oh, and then COVID hit. And to survive the COVID era mandates, and we kind of all know what I'm going to say, right? But I'm going to say it anyway. Businesses took their operations outside. They set up in parking spaces, empty lots, streets, walkways, and these outdoor setups were kind of immediately labeled parklets, but they were different. They were different than parklets. Unlike in the parklet concept originally, the main goal of these COVID era parklets was commercial, was focused on commercial, was really to save jobs and businesses. And municipalities all over the United States, including Petaluma, responded to this need. Places with existing parklet programs like San Francisco and San Diego relaxed their requirements and expanded to include other types of businesses. And in jurisdictions like us, like Petaluma, that didn't have parklet programs, quickly put together temporary programs. And the next slide, please. Eric, I'm sorry, next slide. Am I a little slow? I'm sorry, I'm still seeing the same COVID slide. Okay, here we go.
There's a little delay there, sorry.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I'm working very remotely, so I'm concerned. I want to make sure that my internet is stable. If it's not, let me know. So our response to the COVID requirements or COVID era restrictions and needs was with the free range temporary outdoor permitting program. Free range provided a way for the city to ensure that the outdoor setups were safe and ADA accessible and didn't block access to infrastructure like water, sewer, and so forth. Like other cities, we didn't charge fees, and we really relaxed the design and parking standards that would have otherwise come into play before COVID. Next slide, please. There we go. And you can see that, these are examples of some of our parklets, and you've seen them out, so they don't necessarily look like what we would have had before COVID. Next slide, please. Some of you might actually be aware that, and if you were on the Planning Commission several years ago, the city actually received an application several years ago from a business in Petaluma that wanted to build a parklet. And that application was ultimately taken off the table by the applicant because there was some community pushback from residents in the neighborhood, and also some concerns on the part of the business owner regarding the alcohol licensing issues. But COVID really allowed us to have an opportunity for the city and the community to try out parklets. Some of the concerns that had been raised in that first parklet application before COVID either didn't materialize or just, were taken off the table, like the state alcohol licensing requirements. There were some community members, businesses who kind of grumbled and still are not super happy that the parklets are taking parking spaces, because for their business, that's what's important. But overall, the community members in general the feedback has been extremely positive. And on the city side, we have learned a lot about how the parklet concept works on our streets and within our existing permitting processes, as well as the level of staff resources that would be needed to have a permanent program. Next slide, please. So thanks to the strong support from longtime parklet advocates and the success of our program, the City Council added create a permanent parklet program as a goal for the fiscal year 2021 and 2022. Next slide. So where are we in the process of creating this program? This is what you've all been waiting for. Since last summer, we've been working on a framework. We've been researching what other cities are doing, reviewing our lessons learned internally. We've identified some key policy points and are working with various staff to make decisions about some of them and how to move forward on that. And we're getting input from the Pedestrian Bicycle Committee, the Historical and Cultural Preservation Committee, and Planning Commission before we come to the council with, again, this kind of a framework of what the program would look like and how we would move forward to it. So our hope is that we can actually put something out to the council by the spring. In terms of community input, I am calling over the next couple of weeks all of the existing permit holders who have parklets on public right-of-way and getting their input about what they would like to see from a permanent program. So hopefully in the spring, we'll send it to council. We'll work to actually finalize guidelines, also late spring, and then summer implement the program. Now, this timeline was developed over the summer and early fall. So now with our current surge, the timelines might be changed slightly to allow our permit holders to continue with with their temporary setups and then transition into permanent setup over the course of the next, several months. So these are some of the decision points that we are looking at. Obviously, safety. What would the fees be if we were to charge like a licensing fee to actually use of the space? How long should these be? What they should be used for? Trying to figure out how we would coordinate events and parades around these parklets and other outdoor setups, such as those that we've been seeing on Water Street. And then also, what's internally, what's our city process, and design, which is a big one. Next slide, please. So San Francisco, San Diego, and Berkeley are a few cities that had parklet programs before, expanded them during COVID, and then now have already released guidelines for a permanent program. I'm sure anyone who's been following parklets has probably heard that San Francisco's really been criticized for their new permanent guidelines. And my opinion on that, after looking at their handbook, which I think is actually really well done, is that it's really just a timing issue. COVID is not over, obviously, and I just feel that San Francisco rushed into requiring people to make decisions about these parklets while we're still in a situation where the restaurants need them to survive. The city of Berkeley actually has taken a really different approach, which is that it officially launched its post-COVID guidelines in June of 2021, but it is giving businesses a full 365-day grace period from the date that the City of Berkeley's health emergency order is rescinded to comply with the new guidelines and pay the fees. So that's very generous. They're not going to be rushing into anything. And I think with these different programs and talking to the different people involved in developing them, is that the goal is really forward is to keep the good parts of parklets, to change elements that aren't working right now or won't work in a post-COVID era, and also ensure that these programs can be sustainable from a city resources perspective, because all these cities, including Petaluma, really threw a lot of staff resources into helping these temporary setups get started. And we're not, I don't think, in a position to replicate that in a permanent program. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges that we are going to have to overcome is really striking a balance, across the needs of different community members. In the temporary program, we really focused on ways to maximize commercial activity for the permit applicant, for the business in the space. And in the permanent program, we're going to need to balance the needs of the permit applicants with needs of other stakeholders, such as other businesses, pedestrians, and even the city and our resources that we have. Next slide, please. One of the big challenges that we're going to be looking at, and this is what we're doing now, is really looking at what is the design criteria. So we're pretty set with the safety requirements. It's really about what do we want these parklets to look like that could potentially, just take a little bit more time to figure out. We all know, and I would agree, the orange traffic barriers and the tents aren't aesthetically pleasing. They really, from the very beginning, our goal was to get up parklets, create parklets that were safe, and the water barriers definitely did that, and the tents did that as well, because the tents are pre-engineered and fire retardant, and so we could really quickly allow our businesses to have some kind of structure over the parklets so that they could operate in cold or rainy months with something that wouldn't have to be built. And we're looking forward, particularly in the downtown historic commercial district, we need to think about what we want these parklets to look like, how tall they are going to be, and whether or not we would be wanting to allow roofs. So next slide, please, which actually, in addition, there's some stricter guidelines in the historic commercial district, and our staff who specialize in that is recommending that we follow the guidelines that exist in our current, existing planning guidelines for the downtown area, and also for the federal guidelines as well. Next slide. So you can see, when you look at this, these are I see them as fantastic ways to get businesses to operate, and yet at the same time, the tents are large. They're blocking the view of some of our historic buildings. Even the the photo of the beautiful parklet at Mi Pueblo. We did receive some feedback that people feel that it's too big for that space. So these are the kinds of things that we are going to be looking at. Next slide, please. In terms of our process, what we're leaning toward is to incorporate permanent parklets into our existing encroachment permit process rather than create new codes to regulate them. And for public right-of-way, that would be encroachment permit. And for any outdoor setup that would be on private property, that would go through the site plan and architectural review process. So when we talk about guidelines for parklets, what we're really talking about is parklets on public right-of-way, and in the, any of the outdoor setups on private property would need to go through the existing site plan and architectural review process. We're not going to be creating special guidelines for setups on private property. And this was a question that came up in our Historical and Cultural Preservation Committee was, will the Planning Commission, will the HCPC, will PBAC be involved in the review process for individual parklets? And that's not really what we have in mind. We want to create a process that, we want to create design guidelines in advance and get your input on those so that we can streamline and expedite the application process. And that's for the benefit of the businesses. Parklets are very expensive. The Mi Pueblo parklet was probably several tens of thousands of dollars, which was funded in part by a grant. And the business owner also contributed a significant amount. And the people who were involved in the grant put in a lot of their own volunteer time. So we want to make sure that we're not adding time and additional requirements that are going to make this process so difficult that businesses do not want to participate in them. So that is really my presentation. At this point, we're interested in any questions or comments or concerns that you might have, and I'll just let the chair, I think, if you want to facilitate the conversation, or I'm fine taking questions. It's up to you.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. And it is a big challenge, but also a great asset to our businesses. So I'm pleased to see the progress that's being made. And I'll just open it up to the commission for any questions or comment or feedback on the presentation. And Nancy, if you could stop sharing the screen, we'll be able to thank you so much.
Sure.
I see Commissioner Alonso.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Nancy, for the really thoughtful and important presentation. I do like the visuals you used on where our current parklets are downtown. I think they're all fantastic locations, and they really do work well. Just a brief comment. I think the Mi Pueblo parklet is fantastic. I don't think it's too big at all. It really is helps attract people to Kentucky, and you really just catch it when you're walking down Western. So I think it's a fantastic partnership the city had with Mi Pueblo to make that happen. So thanks for all your work on that. And I think it just underscores the need to have the city be flexible, and provide opportunities for businesses to better be prepared to adapt to changing conditions. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity to do that. We certainly need more of it. And really, we talk about this every once in a while. We have major parking garages downtown. that really often aren't used. The one here in Theater Square is gigantic, and so I think having more parklets on the street, people can walk, they can ride their bikes, they can use the garages and better engage with our downtown businesses. So I just wanted to offer those brief thoughts and thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thanks for those comments. And Commissioner Ryder, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation. And I have a couple of questions, especially regarding the specific areas of feedback that you had requested in the staff report. In particular, I'm curious about density, or looking for feedback on how dense and locations and so forth, but I'm not clear as to how density is measured. You have a number of parklets noted, and we have businesses, but is it by number of parking spaces they take up? And regardless of what that answer might be, I'm curious like where we are now in terms of what that measurement might be. So if you could start with that one. I have a few other questions as well, but.
Sure. When we talk about density, that's a great question. It really is an open discussion. So what does density mean? Does it mean that we want to limit the number of parklets on a particular block or in a particular part of town? We did not put any restrictions on how big a parklet could be. It was really in the temporary program, it was really what business requested. And if they were able to get the permission of the property owner and the business that was fixing the back of that area that they were requesting, we were completely willing to be flexible and allow them to use that space. So you can see, for example, on Water Street, restaurants on Water Street, they have that significant area that each of them has. And, thinking about, for example, Stockholm, which was also a parklet funded in part by the grants that the Petaluma Downtown Association, Arts Center, and the city participated in. They had wanted to have that parklet go all the way almost to the end of that the block there where Petaluma Market all starts, and the other business owner was like, I really would prefer that we keep those spaces open. So, and that's fine. And so what I think we've heard from community members, we actually haven't heard anybody say, hey, we want to limit the number of parklets in the downtown area. It might be one of those things where it's kind of like the market, how the market works sometimes, that people may not be able to, not every business might be able to afford a parklet or want a parklet. And so it's just kind of naturally, will naturally have to do the right amount of parklets. But I think right now we're looking at really focusing on the downtown area or the extended downtown area. And we're really interested in just keeping it oriented to businesses or community groups that might want to have a parklet that's open, but in the downtown area, open to the public.
So Nancy, you're getting a little bit garbly. We're getting it. I'm not.
Did that
left-
answer your question?
Oh, did she not hear me? Do you hear me, Nancy?
Yeah, I think, Nancy, that you did answer the question. I'm seeing a nod. We're just letting you know that your bandwidth is not good and it's a little
Yeah.
garbled. So,
So
but
if you see me
Sorry, is there a
smiling, I'm not.
terrible lag?
Yeah, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. Just the Zoom voice that we all know we've had at one
Okay.
time or another. I also just wanted to kind of echo in with that.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Commissioner Ryder, just
Okay.
we did not we have not had things about like concentration
Okay.
of parklets with the temporary
Okay.
program. We have allowed
Okay.
them.
I
We have allowed them, to go where to best respond to the needs of businesses, but it is not off the table for considering if we were to consider a permanent program. Should we be looking at something like that? Our hesitation has been kind of first person in gets it, and the person that maybe pauses doesn't get it because their neighbors did it first. That's always hard for businesses to feel like first person in gets it and the last person doesn't. But it was one of the things we discussed with the HCPC, especially in the downtown core, was their concern if there was too many of them on one block, would you lose the character? Would you lose the ability to experience the streetscape and the interaction at the streetscape level that's so important in our downtown? But they were not overly concerned about that from a preservation standpoint.
Commissioner Ryder, you had additional questions?
I do, although I do want to leave time for other commissioners. I guess, is this an appropriate time for me to give comments as well, or is this just questions, just to be clear?
Well, we're just asking for comments and feedback on the presentation. We're not going to be voting on this item. So after each of the commissioners has an opportunity, we'll be going to public comment. So I think now is a good time.
Okay. Just to kind of explore a couple opportunities. First of all, I really like the Parklet program. I personally like it, and I think it's an opportunity to perhaps consider looking at integrating public art into design, looking at opportunities to bring in some of our tree initiatives into that same space as well. And I would love to see us encourage this on private property, large parking lots around town as well, personally. I thought that the proposal around setting fees based on level public access was actually an interesting model, and I'd love to hear more about that at some point. And I will leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hooper.
Thank you very much. I just had a few comments for this. I really love the idea of these parklets being a way for us to get around how overdeveloped Petaluma can be when it comes to car access, especially when it comes to community access in our denser, more either office park areas like Commissioner Ryder pointed out, or even some of our more sprawl zones that we've had closer to the east side of town. There are a few things I just wanted to highlight. If we could have some kind of mention with regards to material use, if we're going to have these structures going into places, this is a great opportunity to look at reusable materials so that we're not spreading around more, frankly, carbon-friendly materials. Also, I do like the point made about protecting sidewalks and bike lanes. I think that's really important, especially in some of our downtown areas where the parklets have been great, but it's been difficult to navigate around them. I think templates are a wonderful idea to reduce fees, but really keeping it as close to a ministerial process as possible seems like the best idea, especially if we want this to propagate out further. And I know this wasn't really brought up as a question, but just flagging it, the idea of having a long process between where we are now and bringing parklets into compliance following this wave of, assuming we get to a point where things have stabilized with regards to the pandemic, I think that's a wonderful idea. We shouldn't penalize anybody who's been making good use of this program thus far. Having a long lead time for that makes a lot of sense. I do think that with regards to reducing fees, another idea would be to really look at the type of parklet and where it is in the city. I think if this stays really concentrated to the downtown area, it'll be an incredible shame. Yes, it's nice to have this access for commercial use during the pandemic, but frankly, this is how we'll be able to get public spaces in areas that have been concrete blocks for a long time. So if we're able to reduce fees for areas that don't have a lot of foot traffic or community engagement that doesn't involve driving from point A to point B, I think that's a reasonable approach, especially if we're able to create more community-centric experiences outside of the downtown area, because we do have a problem in the city of really prioritizing our downtown, but not really offering a lot of community space to everyone else. And then the other thing I wanted to just flag, I understand that this has primarily been commercial use, but it would be great to see what the requirements should look like when it comes to these more, in my mind, it's more of like community gathering spaces, but also it almost seems like a pocket park based on some of the designs that were shown or the example art that was shown earlier. It'd be great to get an idea for how many different types of spaces we could see going forward, since this is such an easy way to plant a structure that wasn't there prior. And that's it for now.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bauer, Vice Chair Bauer.
Thanks so much, Chair Potter, and thank you, Nancy, for a really great presentation. I'm so happy that you came and presented that to us because, as we've been going downtown, I've been experiencing and seeing a lot of these parklets, and everybody seems to absolutely love them. They bring such a new element to our downtown, and everything is so vibrant, and I just love seeing friends and neighbors and visitors just enjoying them, and I'm glad that there's a path to have them stay and be more permanent. Regarding the density, I agree with you. I think that it'll probably be self-limiting, but I think that the businesses should, be asked to stay in front of their own footprint unless they get permission from their neighbors. I think that's a good idea. And I definitely do think that having the different design materials and considerations be put into place is really important because I do love the Mi Pueblo one, but the other ones that are just the white canopies and the water barriers are pretty unsightly, and I think we could do a lot